And also we have what is called determined countermeasure, which is a subset of preventive, like system banners. Like as we're going to see when we're going to go to the iOS configuration and we speak about control plane and management plane security measures on the iOS devices, we're gonna be able to put a banner in there saying that so when users log in, we're gonna give them a banner message saying hi there, whatever, hello. Make sure that you're aware that access to the system is allowed only to authorized people, and then you're gonna say per the government regulation number whatever and constitution and whatever other, let's say, documents, you're not allowed to connect to the systems unless otherwise authorized. So then the attacker is going to be, or you can also say, and also we are logging all of the everything which is being done on this device. So that's when you're telling the attacker that, hey, if you get in this on this device and you are not authorized to do this, then you're going to be confronted against the available laws, and then get prosecuted as the law is going to dictate. Likewise, you're going to tell him we monitor everything which is being done on the system, which means we're gonna know that some unauthorized access was being done on that system, and then we're gonna be able to track you down, hopefully, and then take you to court because you have taken an illegal action on that system. You got access to the system unauthorized. Likewise, countermeasures can also be classified based on risk management strategy. Now, from this point of view, we have what is called risk avoidance. Like, for example, if only HTTP and HTTPS traffic is allowed from user endpoints towards the internet, or for example, no encrypted traffic is allowed from the endpoints, that is a risk avoidance countermeasure. So what that means is that why should we, the organization, the specific company can state a system, an endpoint runs 25 protocols, for example. It runs FTP, SMTP, IMAP, POP, TFTP, a lot of NTP, SNMP, a lot of protocols. So the company policy would state clearly, if on those endpoints we don't need all of those services, then why don't we disable those services and allow only services which users should be using on those endpoints to perform their day-to-day jobs? So disable on endpoints, SNMP, NTP, logging, whatever you find unuseful from your case in your organization. Likewise, why should we implement a firewall on the internet edge that is going to inspect all traffic back and forward? So we need a firewall who can actually inspect not only HTTP and HTTPS, but it can also inspect TFTP traffic, FTP traffic. It means that first of all, you need a better firewall, a more intelligent firewall, and second of all, you need more performance on that firewall because you need to accommodate for large transfer files. So then your company policy may state to avoid risk, because that's what it is. Because we don't want to implement security measures to protect SNMP traffic or TFTP traffic. Then we're going to avoid using those protocols and allow users only to access the internet via HTTP and HTTPS. And we're going to implement countermeasures to deal with the vulnerabilities of those two protocols, but not of all protocols. So that's called risk avoidance. Or you may implement a policy that states that no encrypted traffic is allowed from the endpoints. Why is that? Because, for example, if let's say that, again, this is the board of your network, with here having the LAN side and here having the internet side, and here you have the, let's say, internet, where of course also your network is connected, then your company policy may state that as users are on the inside of the network, like if you take as an example test PCA, then they should not be allowed to initiate and use any kind of IPsec or SSL tunnels towards the internet. Because if a user is allowed to do that, whatever the user injects in the tunnel is not going to be visible by network devices. So if the user creates a SSL or IPsec tunnel with somebody from the internet, then whatever the user sends across that tunnel, it is going to be in general encrypted, which means it's not going to be visible by the network devices in the transit path of the user, which is Router 2, Router 3, the SA firewall, and then the internet router. So because that session is being encrypted, nobody in the network can actually see what a user is sending out of the network. So because of that reason, that's highly unsafe. So you might want not to do that. Because if you allow this kind of traffic from users' PCs while in the network, the countermeasure you would have to deploy is going to be on the endpoint. Because in this, if the user creates a IPsec tunnel with somebody from the internet, then the only two endpoints that are going to be able to see the clear text traffic is going to be that VPN endpoints, which is going to be test PCA and whatever is the VPN gateway from the internet. VPN gateway. So only those two devices can actually see the clear text traffic. Which what this means, if you allow this kind of communication from the inside of the network, it means you have to go on the test PC and deploy specific solutions to make sure that the user doesn't leak data through that SSL or IPsec tunnel. Like for example, data loss prevention. So because you may not want to implement that kind of solutions, you're going to end up avoiding the need for that by configuring a security policy which states that the users are not allowed to initiate any kind of VPN tunnels from within the network. We also have what is called risk reduction, which that's going to be most of the countermeasures are going to be residing in risk reduction. So you have for each asset you want to protect, you start with a risk level of 100. So 100% is 100% vulnerable from a specific point of view, and then you're going to implement specific solutions in order to reduce the risk. Like for example, firewall deployed in the network in specific regions of the network so that traffic leaving a sensitive network segment is being blocked. So for example, if you look back at the diagram, if let's say this is your network as in a diagram, but what resides in this segment of the network in here, it is highly sensitive. So what's in here is highly sensitive. One solution could be, so you have highly sensitive data residing in that portion of the network, which means you might configure your firewall policy with a simple rule saying that no traffic is allowed in this direction. So as long as you configure your firewall, or as long as you implement a hardware, maybe a hardware device like a security diode, which allows unidirectional traffic, then what this means is that you're going to deploy something like that, which means no traffic can be sent from the highly sensitive region of the network. And with this specific use case, you're going to make sure that even if the attacker gets access to those systems, they cannot leak the data out of the systems, because all access from the network segment out it is being blocked by either the firewall or not a system. As I was saying, for example, it can be a hardware system like a security diode, which allows unidirectional traffic to happen, and not bidirectional. Then we can speak about what's called risk transfer. So risk transfers means, for example, insurance for data center movement or for specific data leakage. Like, for example, let's say a company wants to move its data center from location A to location B, and the devices that they have to move back and forth end up costing $10 million, for example. Okay. So then we have to make sure, the company has to make sure that they take countermeasures to avoid if those systems get stolen while in transit, or if those systems get damaged in transit. Because if they end up paying insurance for $10 million while in transit, depending how the devices are being transited, they may insure all devices for maybe a couple of $100,000. So at that point, it is being quoted, because if one device gets stolen or one device gets broken in transit, that device by itself may cost $1 million only, and then maybe to insure all systems, it may cost you less more than even one system, because the insurance company is going to say, okay, how do you travel between point A and point B? Or maybe they are going to be able to provide the shipping for you, and then you're going to be covered, insured, that if somebody happens as they transit your devices between point A to point B, they're going to give you back identical systems, or they're going to reimburse you with whatever the value of the endpoints or the systems was. So that's called risk transfer, when the company doesn't have appropriate tools to manage the risk, to reduce the risk, and then what they're going to do, they're going to transfer the risk to somebody else, like to an insurance company. So at that point, the insurance company is liable for whatever happens to the data as per the contract. And also have finally what is called risk acceptance, which means it's always going to be some level of risk which is going to be accepted. Now it depends on the assets. For some assets, which, like we're speaking about publicly available web resources, for those assets, even if there is a risk for that data to be compromised, for example, like not be stolen, but be, let's say, attacked so that it's not available, most of the companies, most of them not big companies, are going to just accept the risk, because let's say it's not worth it for them to invest a large amount of money to protect something which is publicly available, which means that there should be no reason for that data to be attacked or stolen, because it's not something which is actually usable. Because remember that attackers in most cases, except to denial of service attacks, which we're going to speak about, in most cases, when the attacks are scoped, aimed to steal data, then that data is not publicly available and it's valuable on the market, and they can sell it further. But the attackers are never going to launch an attack to steal data which has no value whatsoever. Like as it's, for example, a company's description of their services on their public website. Nobody's going to put efforts to steal that data because it's worthless. So in that case, the organization can actually say, we're going to accept that if somebody puts down the service, then it means that people are not going to be able to access the company's description for X amount of time. But at the same time, if the organization is like Amazon, which were like, for example, eBay, where everything happens online, or like, for example, a web server, a web service which is used for online shopping, for example, then in that case, for that organization, the web service availability is critical. Because if the web server is being attacked and is no longer available, then nobody can access it to do shopping, which means there's going to be no company profit at all, because the company is only focused on selling products online. So if the online server has to function 100% of the times. So this is like one comparison where the same asset, something which is publicly available, for some companies it may end up being totally with no value at all. For other companies it may be critical, because the functionality of the organization relies on that web service running or not running. But except that was for risk acceptance, except that in all cases, for any asset you want to provide countermeasures to defend it, you're gonna have a risk you're gonna implement countermeasures to reduce the risk. You may optionally implement countermeasures to transfer the risk, but at all times you're always gonna end up with some risk that you have to accept. Because as I was saying, even if you want to, you can never ever defend and protect and implement systems to safeguard an asset up to 100%. Because there's going to be a lot of unknown. It's a lot of flaws in protocols, in systems, in policies, in humans. It's too many flaws that cannot be possibly covered and secured. So you're always going to end up with some level of risk which you have to accept it. And that's going to be done based on a specific analysis, to call it that way.